Welcome to Moral Mayhem, everybody. I'm sure all of you were cheered by the amazing debate performance last week. What did you think of that?
I thought it was an exceptionally nuanced discussion of all the relevant political issues of our time.
Yeah, it's so true. I got a lot of really, mind-opening policy ideas and agendas. Just I'm filled with hope.
I remember watching Romney and Obama debate, I think, when I was young. And
Nerd.
I remember thinking, these people are stupid. And now I'm like, those guys were geniuses. But, okay, so on Biden, I've been pretty surprised to see some of our, people in Substakistan and just the general discourse space have the most absurd rationalizations for why it's still a good idea to vote for Biden.
Really?
Right?
I feel like everybody's saying no.
Yeah, like the sensible people, like I yes, like thankfully people like Matt Iglesias knew when to jump ship, but there are other people that are still.
But everybody's. Nate Silver said Biden should step down.
Nate Silver's been saying that for a while, so he's one of those people that's been on the money on this for a while.
Since the fall or something, yeah.
Yeah, but so for David Frum, I think is
give
deranged a little bit.
People give Kamala a better chance in betting markets if she were to be the candidate.
Yeah, I mean,
even though everybody.
Well, if she can be unburdened by what has been, then she might do well.
Do you think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Oh, God.
Was it good?
Yeah, you just grew in attractiveness. So yeah, this argument that I've been sort of trying to respond to, but it's quite, you have to get quite like mechanical, is this idea that, well, he's been in decline presumably for a while. Things are still going well. The Biden White House seems to be handling things well. So what's the big deal? And I think this is how I felt when we were talking about the Columbia protests. It's like people just entered. It's like smart people who've just entered the political conversation, and they just they discover all these rules, and then they're just going like, why should a president be sane? Why should he be healthy? Why?
Let me ask you something.
I wonder why.
Do you really think that a president needs to be able to walk and talk to run the country?
Can he not just let
I guess you don't
advisors
need to be able to walk. Like I wouldn't think someone in a wheelchair was, but it's like if you're not able to walk because of, whatever.
But if you can be on a 10 to 4 a.m. apparently after 5 Adderall
6 hour workday.
No, so if he takes 5 Adderalls, he's very sharp between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. and then he's crashing, as we all do after copious doses of Adderall.
Yeah.
But physical health is one thing, right? But to have I feel like, have any of these people ever taken care of an old senile person,
etc.?
Yeah.
No, but it's like, it's so obvious to anyone looking at it. It's really bizarre. And I mean, Trump said some crazy stuff, obviously, but it's like when people are saying, "Oh, he's old too," I'm like, guys, it's not the same. Come on, let's be honest.
It's really not the same. I mean, I think there's enough other things to disqualify Trump.
The reason I want Biden to step down is because I really don't want Trump to
win.
But I think January 6th is.
But I still think like it's stupidly partisan to think that having a president who is in cognitive decline and demonstrably so is a better choice than Trump, as bad as he may be. And
I think it still is a better. I mean, I would probably still be in the camp of. No, I think he still is a better choice.
Who? Biden? Really?
Yeah, just because of the democratic norms stuff and the fact that things have been going fine. But that doesn't mean that I think
can I convince you?
Reasonable to not replace him.
Can I convince you? Okay, one piece of this is the whole point of having a chief executive or a president is to break like problems in decision aggregation and accountability that, I mean, why do you think we don't have like 20 people running the country, right? Because we need someone to break ties and take decisions. Now, that person doesn't have to be an expert, but that person does need to weigh things and make directional calls and generally act in the interest of himself and the country.
I think it's a big problem.
It's a huge problem that can result in...
I just think Trump is more of a problem in my mind. That's all.
But why do you think he's more of a problem?
Because he tried to disrupt the transfer of power, and he has been trying to convince the country that there was voter fraud that wasn't actually there, and he did all these frivolous lawsuits. Some people say some of them...
I mean, the Democrats have been using the justice system to try to derail his... I think this is a...
but he actually did that stuff. He made up a total conspiracy theory that has threatened the trust of a huge part of the population.
I totally agree. By the way, I also think that...
For not real reasons, like...
Yes, and so... But, are you really scared that he would disrupt the peaceful transfer of power? Like, I just think we have to view January 6th for what it was.
The fact that a huge percentage of the country thinks the elections in America are scams is a huge problem. I think he made a massive amount of damage, and I don't want to give him another shot at it. I don't actually think he's going to start like killing people and become a dictator or something. Okay, I think that what he's doing to the public consciousness is so horrible in the role of president.
But I think he was doing that. I mean, I don't know that he was causing... Like, I think there's something in our political culture now which truly might have been stimulated by Trump. But I don't know if there's a reason to believe that him and people like Alex Jones and this whole ecosystem of conspiratorial people are...
He created the conspiracy about the election.
No, I know. But I'm saying, like... Okay, I agree that he did. But, you're not weighing the risks on the other side of this. Like, the threats that are posed to America, if they continue to be the same things over the last 3 years, then sure, we can just have the White House run everything. Everything's business as usual, but things change, especially in geopolitics. There could be new developments that you have to respond to when you have a leader who can't actually even make decisions.
Yeah, but I find Trump is makes decisions in a very random, unpredictable way. Like, I don't actually feel like there's... Yeah, whatever. We just disagree on the facts of how this weighs out, but...
Yeah, no, by the way, I'm not discounting the harm that Trump has done to democracy, and I think he did start the process that ended up eroding trust on both sides, and now that the Democratic Party has responded in kind, which was awful, and but that is what happens when someone starts eroding democratic norms. It becomes not in the interest of other people to abide by them either. So anyway,
Maxim Lott said that if Trump wants to run against Biden, he should tell Biden to step down so that the Dems won't want to look like they're cowering to Trump.
Yeah. Anyway, so we will... anyway, I thought we were going to be in agreement that having Biden in the White... So I agree, the threat to democratic norms, I don't really know how to think about the real threat, right? Like, I've struggled with sort of the analysis for, okay, how big a threat is he to democracy, right? Is it... Because I think... Certainly, he's less of a threat than a lot of Democrats make him out to be. I think he's obviously not good. The question is, how big of an actual existential threat to democracy is he?
I think you're just undervaluing the threat he's already posed with the basically creating a hugely normal belief in election fraud. That's a big problem that he is totally responsible for.
Yeah. Anyway, should we move on to something more substantive?
You didn't want to talk about them. You didn't want to see the golf contest?
Between Trump and Biden?
I think we should. That, I don't think would be a good idea. Maybe if it was at 11 a.m. Well,
yeah, just as he's coming up on the Adderall.
Although, golf seems like one of those sports where they both probably are actually good, right?
Probably.
I feel like it's a sport that rewards years of dedication.
I mean, also
Even
if
when
it,
you start to decline, you're still like
yeah, also if it's like
good.
if you're in a public facing role, like this is not random. Like people aren't like selected randomly to rise to the top of any of these like
It's all
political
about the golf
institutions.
skills.
No, I'm saying these are people who are extremely image conscious, which is why they were both so upset about their golf skills. And I think that also gives you a window into like why. I mean, it's not a surprise that Biden isn't walking away. Like you bet he definitely thinks Trump is like he's saving the country from Trump, and he believes all these things that are basically justifications for him to lie to people. I mean, frankly, if you think Trump has eroded
Wait,
democratic
what do you mean
norms,
for him to lie to people?
this whole thing has been completely obfuscating the truth. Both him and his people around him have categorically lied about how fit he is to be president. I mean, I just don't think it's comparable even to people talk about FDR. I've seen those pictures, and I think it's one thing to be in declining physical health. To be completely, most. I texted one of our my cousin's dad, who's a doctor, and he thinks he probably has dementia sprinkled with some. What did he say?
He said Parkinson's.
Parkinson sprinkled with some dementia on top.
I don't think he used the word sprinkle, but it
Yeah.
was implied. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah, no, it's not funny. I actually feel really bad for Biden. And I do think you're probably right that he's probably thinking he's doing the
I
right
think they
thing.
should
I don't
waterboard
know.
Jill Biden. That's what I think. That's my new policy recommendation.
Why is it the wife always gets blamed? The
Well,
wife always gets blamed.
Have you seen the picture of her just sitting at the desk and saying preparing for NATO or something? She's riding the power wave too,
I mean,
and so are everyone around him. They want to, but it's so short-sighted from his aides especially. No one's ever going to want to work with them again, given what they pulled off. It's disgusting.
well, wait, wouldn't people want to work with them given what they pulled off? I feel like isn't that the opposite?
I mean, depends on like what type of people you're talking about. But anyway,
Oh, did you want to talk about the Mary Harrington IQ thing quickly?
what was that?
She posted that article about how it's wrong to select based on IQ
Oh,
theoretically.
yeah.
And I was thinking about this. So, okay, I get why people have the intuition that it's wrong.
To what, select embryos?
Yes,
For
because
IQ.
they're thinking about whichever kid you have, you're gonna love, and to think about that you would have like chosen among them. It's like it's sort of like people don't even want to say which of their kids they like the best or whatever, or which I think it might be true that you love all your kids equally, but obviously you like some of them more.
I don't think you love all your embryos equally, though. I think once someone is brought into existence, there's very good reason to at least pretend that you love everyone equally. But
Well,
selection
it's
is
like-
going to happen regardless.
Yeah.
Something is going to get selected regardless.
Right. That's exactly the point I wanted to say. Is like, okay, so if you select randomly, you could have selected the one that you would have selected if you tested, or you could have selected another one. But if you had selected the one that you would have selected if you tested, no one would think anything went wrong, obviously. And then if you're saying that, oh, it's actually correlated negatively with other good traits, then you're just saying, okay, I believe in the selection thing.
Yeah.
Just do it on. You just need to get a little bit better at it before.
But yeah,
we do
by the way,
it.
that wasn't the argument she was making. And I think two things. So one, that is sometimes an argument that smart skeptics will ask. Like, I think that's the first question like we asked when we were talking to someone who knew about this, is like, oh, are there trade-offs that mean that, a gene that makes you higher in IQ, if you optimize for that, does that like sort of take away from some other trait that we care about that we don't know about? And the answer is like most likely not, given that it seems at least like those trade-offs are much less common than people initially thought they were.
Mhm.
I don't know I don't obviously know the biology and the mechanics behind that, but it seems as if that's the case, then but the argument she was making was a little bit different. I think the argument she's making is not even that, oh, you might select for the wrong thing by mistake. It's that, no, look, the high IQ people earn more money, and we know people who earn more money,
that they then have less
they have
kids.
fewer kids. And so in fact, what we should do, if anything, we should have lower IQ people. I don't know if she said this explicitly, but it was
That's
absolutely
a really bad
absurd.
argument, yeah.
And of course, Rob Henderson restacked her
No,
great,
but like
great effort.
I do think that I personally would not overemphasize the selection thing in like I think it's fine to have kids naturally. Like I don't think it's like you have to do it by any means. But I don't, if people want to do it, I
don't know.
It's hard for me to understand if parents want to do it and they're only going to have a certain amount of kids anyway. It's like nothing's being lost when they select on a criteria that they value. And like what's his name? Diana Fleischman's husband. Jeffrey Miller makes this point all the time where he's like, you selected your mate based on intelligence and attractiveness. And the reason you're like driven to do that is because we're wired to reproduce with somebody that is attractive and intelligent.
But like, I think one way that I challenge your intuition, even though I kind of feel bits of it myself, is imagine, you could imagine a future 20 years from now when it's commonplace, right? It's that, and if your kid finds out that this technology was available, would you feel moral responsibility for not having done?
Of course not, because they wouldn't have been there, or they probably wouldn't have been the one selected.
Sure.
So they're gonna be like, oh, thank God you didn't use it. That's like saying, like, would a kid who was born to teen parents be upset if abortion was available?
Okay,
like, it's like that doesn't make sense.
I think you're being a little bit unfair because
I'm not.
For example, if you didn't select against Down syndrome, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're making like an action, a commission omission distinction that I don't know is very on super solid ground, because
I think
what's
when
the
you're
difference
selecting, it's normally for the benefit of, like, yes, if you could select on like some kind of mental health characteristics about happiness, then it would be for the kid.
But IQ is positively correlated with a bunch of things we care about. That's why we care about it. It's like correlated with health span.
I know, but I don't think it's correlated strongly with like life satisfaction and happiness. Is it?
Yeah, that's just because I don't trust. I'll be honest. This is people. I trust zero things that are research based on life satisfaction and happiness. I think that science is totally broken.
Well, my intuition is that it's not correlated.
I mean, why wouldn't it be if it's correlated with all the other metrics of well-being?
I don't know. I mean,
like, if it's correlated with physical health, if correlated with longer life, correlated with fewer accidents, correlated with higher income, which we do know predicts, at least up to a certain point, moment-to-moment happiness. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess it's more just that, when you're selecting among your own embryos, for instance, Down syndrome people seem very happy at the very least. So, I don't know.
Okay, then.
I think anyone would observe that.
Yeah, but I think
I'm not. You may be right that like within a smaller band of intelligence, there's a correlation. I just don't think it would be that strong. And yeah, I don't know. It's not.
Look, I mean, do you want to scrape off?
But you're right. Especially with the health stuff, like if it's correlated with all this health stuff, then yes, I would expect that to be true. But I was trying to say that it's also for what the parents want. The parents want a certain type of relationship with their kid. That's part of why they're having a kid. Of course, when parents end up having, a child with Down syndrome or some other thing, they end up loving being that child's parent normally too. But that doesn't mean that it's not okay to like have a preference for like the type of lifestyle.
And I think there's a social component to it.
And I think part of it is like not everybody wants to be, having to have responsibility for their kid for much longer than the normal amount. And it's like, and then you have family diseases. Nobody seems to have problems with that sort of stuff, right? Or much less.
But the Mary, coming back to why Mary Harrington is totally wrong. There's and someone, our Substack friend, usually Wash, pointed this out. If you this IQ fertility correlation is spurious. I mean, it flows through other economic things, which we know. Like, for example, like the Haredim in Israel, high fertility rate, isolated culture, has nothing to do with IQ. They have super high IQs. Most of them are Ashkenazi. So I don't know.
I think it's that because high fertility subcultures tend to be less productive and
Yes.
more xenophobic and technophobic.
Yes.
That maybe we expect them over time to like just not prioritize or select for
Yeah,
intelligence.
I mean, that's
I
what
think
you,
it's more just about prioritization and culture and stuff, though. A lot
I think
of
it
the
is more
time.
about culture, and so which is why she's just drawing the wrong inference that, firstly, that correlation is it's not some like massive historical correlation. This is 20 years of data, right? Extrapolating that like far into the future is, I don't know, dubious at best. And then there's the additional thing about, it's not sort of like directly, it's not like IQ's driving fertility decisions. That's just very unlikely to be the case. So, also, I mean, the big problem I have with it is I
It's
don't
also
give a
more
fuck about
wealth
having.
than IQ, right? Like
Sorry?
the correlation is more strongly linked to wealth than IQ, I think.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I haven't checked.
Yes,
that,
it is.
but-
But anyway, the reason I think we fundamentally disagree with her is all of this are we're picking at her specific points, but really she's made it clear that what she wants is just a bunch of people. She just wants a bunch of people, not for, I'm sure, I don't know, mostly for trad religious reasons, and she's totally fine with them living mediocre lives with mediocre institutions in half dysfunctional societies. That's what you
But
get.
I think that's fine. Like, I think it's fine to be, like, I think the world is already good enough that it makes sense to be pro more people without thinking things are going to get better. But I also think that she's not pro more people. She's also anti-surrogacy, anti lots of things that are related to other types of family formation. So...
Yeah. So I don't know if the trads are such a good ally in this fertility cause.
She's
It's really annoying.
She's so funny with her anti birth control stuff, which is really becoming a thing, like in the broader culture. I think
Yeah.
I've seen like more women, and I'm not saying they don't have a point. Anyway, like I think I hadn't thought that much about like how little we understand it until more recently and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, for me, the cost benefit seems very worth it. But I think it makes sense that a lot of people are like thinking more carefully about that. But she calls it not taking birth control and not using protection. She calls it rewilding sex.
Yeah, very interesting.
She's trying to make like the puritanical sexual norms of sex only in marriage primarily into like a hot subversive
I think that's
thing
gonna work.
of rewilding it.
Yeah, I have my suspicions. I'd bet against that.
Anyway, should we talk about university admissions?
Yeah, let's move on to a cheerier subject. So university admissions. This is something. It's not particularly topical, but I think that a bunch of things have happened in the last year that have put parts of this in the spotlight. Whether that's like DEI stuff during, with the anti-Semitism stuff, or just the affirmative action ruling. And you recently wrote a piece about endowments and how people probably think of them a little bit incorrectly. And let's start the discussion with talking about something slightly meta or big picture, which is, there's two questions. So one is, what is a university optimizing for, descriptively? And the second is, like, normatively, what should they be optimizing for with some, like, public interest in mind, if that's the right way to look at it. So let's go to the first sort of definition first. Yeah.
So it's sort of like you're saying we're going to define some idea of quality. We're going to come up with ways to attempt to identify the qualities that in aggregate make a high quality student for us. And then we're going to choose people on that basis. And then to the degree that they're not doing that, you could say they're, discriminating or doing something that is blameworthy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that mechanically this is a sufficient guardrail. But I'm saying
No, I'm not saying it's a guardrail.
Yeah.
I'm just saying hypothetically.
Oh, yeah, correct. So hypothetically, we want to. There's two questions of: is it okay that universities are optimizing for what they're optimizing for? But leaving that aside, let's assume they're optimizing for prestige or long-term reputation. Now, you could have very subjective interpretations of what that means, but I'm guessing. A non-controversial way to define it is you want all else equal more influence in the world by your alumni. You want, in interest of that goal, it's sort of like it's like the AI thing where to achieve anything you need to keep yourself alive. So like self-perpetuation and getting money for endowments becomes a sub-goal within that larger goal. So these two seem like rational self-interest guided goals.
And then also they, have a mission and they are a nonprofit institution. And normally the mission is some kind of like more idealistic thing about spreading knowledge or maintaining enduring knowledge or creating innovation.
Spreading the seeds of knowledge.
But universities do that too. Like I'm the way that they have prestige is that they actually produce like impressive scholars and also people who go there often go on to do good things in their life, which they can then try to like claim credit for when probably most of it was that they selected good people, but regardless.
And so what's interesting here is let's kind of talk big picture about the public interest question a little bit actually, because Harvard, for example, in 2021, they received north of $600 million in federal grants, right? And that's about, did you say 10% of their budget, roughly?
By the way, tuition and all of that is only 22% of Harvard's operating revenue.
Right. And the rest is sort of like gifts and endowment money.
45% is gifts and endowment money. 16% was like some other small sources. And then, they have some private grants and some public grants.
But just I want to clarify because.
But wait, sorry. Just can I say one more thing? That's also not the financial profile of small private universities. That's only the ones with these like massive endowments that are able to then cover most of the operating costs, not through revenue.
Yes, and this is the problem with nonprofits is just operating revenue is one thing. The operating costs, right? In most places, in most for-profit entities, people are minimizing operating costs. That is the objective function, to minimize operating costs. In the university, there's good reason to believe the incentives are to maximize operating costs. So we have so this idea that
the
like
incentives are to maximize operating revenue so that you can spend more.
Correct.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is there is no pressure to minimize operating costs. So we shouldn't take it like I think the argument that only 10% of the budget comes from federal funds. So, universities are doing this like noble thing is wrong because we don't know what that tuition is going towards, right? Like administrative bloat is probably a huge part of that. I would love to get information that lets me dig into this.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that from enough places that I'm sure it's true. And the, real cost of university for students did increase a lot for a few decades, but it actually hasn't inflation adjusted increased since like the past 20 years. So that's just something people might not realize.
It has not?
Over the past 20 years, no. But over the previous 20 years, it did significantly, I'm pretty sure. I'm just saying, like, it hasn't actually kept going as crazy. Like, the tuition sticker prices have increased more over the past 20 years than the net cost of tuition, which means more people are getting grants, which means essentially that some students, a very small percentage of students are paying the full $75,000 or whatever ridiculous sticker price it is. And the rest are getting various amounts of tuition discounts based on a combination of their academic merit and financial situation.
And I'm guessing the federal grants are going mostly towards that. Because that's a big part of federal grant use is just
I don't know if the federal
tuition.
grants are restricted in how they're used for operating expenses. But there's those various funding sources could be restricted in different ways, but I don't know.
Okay, so basically we have the situation where at least some of these universities are pretty rich and can, it's unclear that holding the, holding the federal funds hostage will, I don't know to what extent it'll change their behavior. It probably will change their behavior on the margin, has to. The other thing is the counterfactual tax credit that is another cost that the university is getting not to pay, right? Like basically, you made the point before when we were talking that there's a bunch of nonprofits that we exempt from tax. So universities aren't special in that
Including,
regard.
religious institutions.
Right, including like massive churches and stuff like that. But while we're debating this, it's true that these things are structured in a way where they're structured by making use of structures that allow for this so that they serve the public interest. And insofar as it deviates from the public interest, we should obviously revisit that.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I just think that that's a broader topic, and I think universities are like not the first place I would look. Even though I think that the administrative bloat stuff sounds very wasteful and negative to the overall like educational knowledge building process and all of that.
And so coming to the admissions themselves,
right. So basically it's like, when we think about university admissions, like for example, when the case that was claiming Asians were discriminated against, which they won, was based on the fact that the SAT scores for different races on average among people admitted and rejected were much higher for Asians than they were for black people, and white people were in the middle, basically. I think there was some small difference on sex as well, actually, but I can't remember. But the point is that it's not inconceivable that you could have a quality metric which incorporated test scores in addition to a bunch of other kinds of things, extracurriculars, sort of the uniqueness of your extracurriculars. Because when they're doing admissions, they're not just focusing on like who are the best individual students. They're building sort of a portfolio that is, they're hoping to build a portfolio of people who will, interact in ways that are like greater than the sum of their parts and all that kind of thing.
So like, I guess one way to look at it is if you're trying to produce these leaders or people that will influence the world in a positive way, then you've got two ways to do it. And one is, actually three ways. So one is just like selection in the individual case. Second is the portfolio selection.
Creating an environment.
Yeah, creating an environment so that the externalities that people have on each other and how they use each other's network to create value in the world. And the third is, what does the university do in terms of learning and the interaction with professors and stuff, the human capital development, if you will. That's, I guess, the social capital is part of it, but I'm just separating it out because it's a different mechanism.
Right. But yeah, my point is that, you could have a quality metric which was defensible, which ended up such that among admitted applicants, you saw that same pattern of average SAT scores where there was a difference in race. And that could be simply because race happened to correlate with some diversity metric or some positive character metric that was within the thing. And, obviously you're going to see correlations among these things among groups, especially because we know that there are racially correlated subcultures in the US, obviously. So, I think that my point is just that alone wouldn't be enough for me to say, oh, they're definitely discriminating against Asian students. The fact that had to have
but I guess in fact
scores.
it was much more than that.
No,
right?
In this case it was just explicitly on the basis of race. It's not that race happened to correlate with other things they cared about.
Because they were sending flyers specifically to invite particular racial groups to apply. That's pretty good evidence that that's what you're trying to do.
I think there was, and I think they had I can't remember, but it was much more explicit than what I'm saying. And the Supreme Court basically said what I'm talking about would be protected. Like, you're still allowed to consider how race affected someone's life and all this kind of stuff. And you're allowed to consider, extracurricular things and soft skills and all that kind of stuff. You're just not allowed to like add on points specifically for race, which I think is very wrong. And I think that was the right decision. I'm just saying that you probably would still see somewhat of a pattern in that direction, I would expect.
I mean, ultimately, I've heard enough people who know legal theory and mechanics more than me saying that it's not inconsequential. It would make a difference. The question is like how much of a difference, and really the main variable to focus on there is there are people making this. So
no, I think it would make a difference, to be clear. Yeah.
Right. But I think what's interesting here is, and this happens in like mega corporations too, where I mean, for a startup, maybe the incentives are super aligned, right? So if someone's going and recruiting, even if they're doing something super subjective like an interview, there's much more incentive to kind of be and hire the best person because that person matters, and they're the person hiring is monetarily incentivized to do that. If as the organization gets bigger, that's sort of less the case, and you have more levels of bureaucracy who are not accountable or incentivized properly. All of these exist in universities, but I think they might even be worse because they have an ideological agenda that's quite like married to this. And you can, if you look at the admissions officers, I think the most senior people in these places make like 140K, right? And so if you look at how much people are getting paid, this is the same reason why you just do get people who are deriving their source of validation from something that's not monetary, but presumably they think they're fulfilling a social goal, which means we should like be very conscious of the fact that they might not be following even these incentives that we set out earlier about like the long-term university prestige and all of that. Having said that, given that the outside world, but whether that's politics or nonprofits or even corporations, that DEI has become a thing and that people are rewarded for specific types of racial diversity and gender diversity, means that even if the university was rationally pursuing self-interest, they would mirror that, right? Because you should see some proportion of...
That's a good point. Like you're saying that which actually is interesting, right? Because a lot of the time when it comes to businesses who are not very diverse and they're questioned why they don't have more diversity, they're like, listen, people aren't applying. And so if they're, going to universities and trying to recruit more racially diverse candidates, then yes, you're right. It could be in your interest to have a more racially diverse student body. So that's not a bad point. I think the issue is just like, I agreed with the Supreme Court decision, which was that on its own, wanting to have more racial diversity is not a good enough reason to discriminate against people based on race. Whereas, like, they would consider, I think, other types of diverse experiences as being a good enough reason. But, like, you shouldn't have to tack on points for race. If race is proxying all these other types of diversity, then it should just show up through types of difference that people would understand the function of why that might make a richer school environment. You shouldn't have to like add on 2 points. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think like as a political culture, we have to make a decision on which way to push on this. Like, you could take a very libertarian approach to this and say, you know what, let's actually just like defund all of these universities and put no restrictions on them. Let them like only take black people if they want to. Who cares? Like, let's do that. And then the corporate sector and everyone else will adjust accordingly, and they'll revise their expectations of what to expect from Harvard, right? But we're in this middle ground where they've been like slimily doing this and under the guise of like some fairness, and they're receiving money. And this middle ground is just really bad for the public because, corporations have inertia, and so everyone's still using these as like valid, credible signals. But I think we're seeing some encouraging signs of people bringing back the SATs and bringing back things to establish credibility.
Yeah, and I mean the SAT thing, I don't think the SAT should be like the only metric by any means, but for kids who didn't have as much opportunity, that's the easiest way to show how smart you are. Like if you let's say you're somebody who had to like care for your younger siblings or something, and you didn't have time to do all these extracurriculars.
Yeah. I mean, you could just, I think this is so...
Like, then at least you can crush it on the SAT.
People who, question the value of the SATs, I sometimes, I don't even know whether I want to argue with them because it's like, who do you think does best on the SATs? You think it's rich white kids? Like look at any standardized test. Look at the GMAT, GRE. Look at Indian and Chinese. It's if like all those things about this is
No, that's why white people have an easier like the thing. It wasn't just that black people had lower scores than Asian people. White people also had lower scores.
Right, and the idea that standardized tests are
when
racist because of they're linguistically biased is also ridiculous because it seems like foreign nationalities are able to do those tests.
It's also like whatever if you can't. I mean, it's an English university, so like I don't understand that kind of thing. I'm like, well, yeah, you have to speak English really well to go to a top university that's taught in English.
But like I was also
you don't even have it doesn't mean you have to like have no accent and all this kind of stuff like
oh,
to
no.
your point, lots of people are able to do great on those tests who are second language.
I know. It's just laughing when you said you can do okay if you have an accent. I was just remembering you doing an Indian accent. All right. She's embarrassed.
No, because I don't do any. Okay, he just tells people whenever we're around in public, now apparently on the podcast too, oh, Reagan loves to do this offensive Indian accent.
With the head bob and stuff.
I've never done an Indian accent. I'll never do an Indian accent. I'll never validate this false lie for you to hold over my head.
I was going to say there's something that's just still not sitting right with me about the university discussion because I think, okay, so SATs or anything that you look at, SAT has a correlation of, I don't know, it's like 0.8 or something with IQ scores, like professional IQ testing, right? So it's as high as you can get. But of course, obviously none of this is perfectly correlated to the thing you care about, which is some abstract thing, right? Mm-hmm. Or real world outcomes. But guess what? Like, we don't know other methods, right? Now, I'm not on the side of saying if we don't know something that is cleanly measurable, we should abandon that project and never do anything subjective. But we should at least make the subjective, we should at least have more clarity on the subjective stuff than we do have currently, because I just have no confidence that these people are making decisions that are in the best interest of anyone except serving their own ideological agenda.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's fine so long as they're a private university, honestly. It's that to the degree that they're nonprofits and get public funding, I agree with you that we should have more of a
private university,
more of an assurance that they're doing something that at least makes sense.
But
like there can be there can be like diversity among publicly funded institutions and how they go, what their goal is and how they go about it. But it has to at least like seem plausible, I guess, right?
Yes. No, I agree with that. I think the only thing I'd say is it's a little bit different from a private company in that I think principally, if you look at it, fine, we would go with that. In reality, it's like much less accountable within than a company is, right? So everyone reports right up to the top and is responsible to shareholders. Universities aren't really responsible to their funders. I mean, you saw that during like the whole anti-Semitism thing. Like, it was very hard for donors to put pressure because the independence is, feature of the whole system. And so I think it'd be good to look into sort of like what the institutional structure and incentives are. But it's not clear to me that, because what's clear is these institutions right now have a significant impact on society at large, right? Like, you look at any institution, look at the Supreme Court, anything of consequence, there's such disproportionate representation from the top 10 universities.
Yeah, but those people might have become successful anyway. Like,
because that was back in the day.
No. It's that it's still a small percentage of. So like.
I see what you mean.
It's like 5% of Ivy League grads become someone big or something, or 1%, whatever percent, where you're like drawing the bar for what it means to get big. But my point is that it's a minority of them. Most Ivy League grads just become like upper middle class people. Right. So, those minority, of course they went to Ivy Leagues because they were impressive people, most of them. But like, had they gone to a non-Ivy League school, they may have just ended up very similarly situated.
Yeah, so
Like I think going to a good school does really help you with your first job in the US in a way that's like much stronger probably than Canada. But I don't know.
Did
I
I tell you
doubt
I
that
went to
it matters
MIT?
that much. Oh my god.
I keep
You didn't
reminding
even say that you went to school in Boston this
I keep
time.
reminding Reagan every 2 days. It's like, aren't you happy that you're engaged to someone who went to MIT? Yeah.
Yeah, love that MBA. It's
Oh,
perfect
you
for
shouldn't have said, you shouldn't
podcasting.
have said MBA. Jesus, it's lower status. I'd like to say MIT because people think that I went to undergrad there, which is so much cooler.
Oh yeah, where you studied astrophysics. I forgot.
I mean, look at me. I do look like I
And
studied
and
astro-
you were on the chess team, I think.
Yeah, yeah, totally. 4D chess. But wait, what were we talking about before this?
Well, actually, I thought we should move on anyway to talk
Cool.
about like the balancing, because like we talked a lot about the selection criteria. Obviously it's a little bit fuzzy, obviously it needs to take into account intelligence, but what you were also hinting at a little bit before was, you know, they want to enable their students to go on to big things, and part of that is just having the name that can help.
Yeah.
Even if the student was, whether they are having this big social capital improvement or not, right? Having the name helps. And then part of it is also that, you know, smart people are interacting together, and they're also interacting with people who have social connections.
Yes.
And so that was where we were going to talk a little bit about like legacy emissions and how they balance class size with like quality metrics and with metrics around who can pay, and that correlates with the legacy stuff too.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to ground this, I looked this up right before, and I think it's about 10 to 12% of Ivy Leagues have, or at least at Harvard, it's about 10 to 12% some legacy connection, right? But not all of those 10 to 12%, as you pointed out, mean that they would not have gotten it otherwise, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you believe there's some correlation of inherent traits that's heritable, then you should expect that some of those are not counterfactually legacy cases.
Right, exactly. And a bunch of those are probably paying full price. So I talked about this a little bit before, which is that the headline tuition prices have gone up significantly over the past 20 years, inflation adjusted. But when you look at the net costs that students are paying, that hasn't really risen. And that's what that has to mean, is that there's a more progressive tuition cost basically now than there used to be. So kids who either like are borderline borderline on the quality metrics to have gotten in, they'll be paying full price, and kids who are like would have gotten in at, you know, were like well within getting in but have a lot of family money or whatever, will also pay full price, because schools know that them having to pay will not as significantly impact their decision on where to go as it will somebody who's more financially constrained. So they have, you know, and this is actually more of a thing at smaller colleges and universities, where they don't have such a big percentage of their revenue covered by charitable gifts and endowment funds. But they need to basically balance. We need to have a class size of X number of students. We need to hit this revenue target within like a pretty tight band. And so you have to send offers out to more than the students that will accept, to more students than the class size you want, because not everybody will accept. And so what they do is they actually like have complicated ways of trying to aggregate up probabilities of, will somebody accept with this offer, with this tuition discount, and then optimizing that to get to like the right class size and the highest revenue while keeping quality as high as possible as well, basically. So it's just, my point is that, you know, one of the ways that universities fund students' grants is through the full price tuition paid by other students. And like the more of that you have, then the less like other sources of revenue are needed, right? And so anyway, my point is that what we've seen is an increase in the degree to which richer students or less slightly lower quality students are paying more, while more sort of deserving students are paying less. So the sticker price going up is actually has been a sign of what I think people would consider a better distribution of who's paying for college.
Sure. Yeah. No.
But that doesn't change the fact that what we were talking about before, like the administrative bloat and all of that, isn't out of hand and that the overall price is not too high. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that, you know,
you would still need legacy. Well, you need legacy students for two reasons. So one is social capital, and you know that's just a feature of the world that we can't get rid of, as unfortunate as some might think it is. But it is good for capable poor kids to be around slightly less capable rich kids.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good that those rich kids can finance the education of those kids to some degree.
Right.
I mean, like I said, at Harvard, that's not the case because only 22% of their revenue is from tuition anyway. So that's only a little bit the case. But at like smaller private colleges, tuition revenue will be like 60%, right? So there, it's a bigger effect. But
cool.
Yeah, my point is just that I think that there's a reason that people find it off-putting when money is part of the reason somebody's getting into a school. And that's because what you were saying earlier, which is that like they are to some degree the grantors of social capital and like the gatekeepers towards certain pathways. At least they make it much easier to go on certain pathways. And so people are like, no, that should be done according to some public good. But if it is conceivable that the public good is better served by letting in enough rich kids to make it cheaper for the whole institution to run.
Right. And like I think this is some place where like I used to have a hyper egalitarian impulse on some of these issues, especially when it related to social mobility. But I think we need to like temper that because it's a natural impulse to have. You know, like for example, people have but people have it too broadly here, where they talk about things like healthcare or talk about education or talk about anything and say like it's not fair. Like the rich get this and then they can do. It's true that there is some compounding effect of wealth, of like being able to get these inputs cheaper and better, such that it increases the probability of future success rather than decrease. So it's you can see theoretically how it exacerbates some inequalities. But having said that, we have to like not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? It's what else would money, if we all agree to use money as a necessary incentive, then rich people would only want to get rich if they can do things that benefit their offspring and benefit people around them. So insofar as like the cost of that is, and they're actually giving something back in the process, is sort of a slightly easier time going to college. I don't have a big problem with that.
What the alternative is, which would be that if you didn't let in as many rich kids, revenue would be lower, which would mean you'd need more public grants or lower spending, which would probably lower spending. But
yeah,
you know, that might be more of a pressure to cut costs, I guess. But my point is that what?
Oh no, I was going to say that we didn't talk about we talked about the funding effects, but one thing I was getting at before when we were talking about like the influence that people from here have.
I remembered my point.
Okay.
It was that, you know, so you'd have to cover that with, you know, people might say, oh, the government should provide more support then. So then that would be, you know, coming from the average taxpayer or whatever, rather than from the wealthy kids at the school. And I'm just like, it's not clear that it's better. Yes, you wouldn't be able to buy access to the name brand, but then again, it is good to have poor kids make those, or not even poor kids, middle class, upper middle class kids make connections with like wealthy kids that.
Yes, and it's also, you know, like we don't want social mobility is not our only goal. The other goal of having productive people interact with, like what you want from these places is output that'll benefit all of society. Exactly. I mean, America and the elite of America produce a very outsized portion of the world's like, you know, technology and well-being. So it's fair to sort of maximize that. I think it's fine to have social mobility as one ingredient, but I'd prefer that to be in service of like the overall maximizing social welfare goal rather than reduce inequality through social mobility, which can have different consequences.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool.
All right.
Are we done then?
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for listening. Fun. We'll be back with a new episode next week. We're going to be doing 2 episodes. So get your ears ready for more content.
All right. See you.
Okay, bye.